encourage you this morning to get out the bulletin you hopefully got as you came in. There's an outline on the back for where we're going here this morning. And it's good to be back with you after the birth of our child. She's doing great. Priscilla's doing wonderful. Mom's doing great. Big sister's doing really good. And big brothers are doing good as well. You know, one thing I love about having a new child, and if you have kids in your family, or you know kids, or you've got nieces and nephews, or grandchildren, or however that might play in terms of how you interact with kids, you've probably grown to know that each kid is different. Each kid is unique. Each kid has their own kind of personality and way of doing things. I found that already just with 3 weeks old for Priscilla. I've been starting to figure her out already. In fact, I put a picture on there. I had to put a picture up there for you. There's a picture of her. Now, one of the things that you noticed probably right away is something we noticed right away too when she was born, is there's a feature in her that is probably pretty distinctive. It kind of is there in front. What did it is that you notice about Priscilla right away, just from that picture? Her eyes, yeah. You guys were the worst. I'm sorry. I mean, Saturday night they were awesome, 8 o'clock. You guys are, so we got to wake up here a little bit this morning. Yeah, her eyes. Her eyes are interesting. In fact, what was really interesting is that soon after she was born, those first couple of days, watching her eyes as she took in the people around her. And what was happening was she was recognizing that those voices that she's been hearing for the last 9 months in the womb, those voices actually have a face. Those voices have hands. Those voices have eyes. And you could see her kind of process this as she stared deeply into you, as you held her, and as you talked to her, she was recognizing my voice. She recognized the voices of her siblings. She especially recognized the voice of her mother. And what she's come to figure out these last 3 weeks is that if she raises her own voice, other voices, the voices that hold her, the voices that change her, the voices that feed her, will respond to her voice. Voices. We hear them everywhere and every day. I want you to think about this for a moment there on your outline, actually give you a little space to fill in. What are the voices that you heard today so far? What are the voices that you maybe have heard today so far, the voices that you hear each and every day? Think about all those different voices and all those different sources of those voices that try to get your attention each and every day. Because those voices that you hear, they want something from you. You know, I don't know what's on your list of voices that you hear every day, but if you're like me, you probably thought immediately of your family. You thought of your children. You thought of your spouse. You thought of maybe a neighbor or a dear friend. You think a lot about those voices that you do life together with. But what about those other voices in your life? Those other voices that are just as loud, if not louder. Voices of newscasters. Voices of politicians. Voices of YouTubers and social media friends. Voices of websites that you frequent. Voices of actors on the big screen and little screen. Voices of musicians singing to you as you drive in your car. Voices that yell at you because of how you're driving and singing in your car. Hear voices every day. What voice do you hear the most? And what do those voices that you listen to, what do they want from you? Because honestly, the reason those voices are louder, and they seem to get louder and louder and louder, is they want something from you. They want you to do something. They want you to buy something. They want you to vote for something. They want you to believe something. They want something from you. But yet there's another voice in the midst of the cacophony of voices that attack us every day. A voice that doesn't want anything from you, but only wants something for you. A voice that has your best interest at heart, even when you don't have your best interest at heart. A voice that so loves you, that calls you by name, invites you into a family that lasts forever. And so we're going to look at and listen to that voice today. And as we listen to that voice today that wants everything for you and nothing from you, we do so by diving into that lesson we heard earlier this morning. The story of the transfiguration of Jesus. It's in the Gospel of Luke. I encourage you to pull out your Bible there today. It's on page 1102 in the Pew Bible, and in the Story Bible, the Picture Bible there for kids of all ages. If you want to pull that out, it's on page 345, and on your outline there as well, we'll have some spots to fill in. But in Luke 9, verse 28, Luke tells us this. Now about 8 days after these sayings, and you got your Bible, you can kind of flip back, okay, what were those sayings that happened 8 days ago? And you learn that the sayings that happened 8 days ago were pretty important sayings. One of those sayings was said by Peter when Jesus asked his disciples, "Who do you say that I am?" And Peter confessed that you are the Christ of God. A recognition that Jesus is the promised one that God had said he would send. But yet, surprisingly, Jesus says, don't tell anyone. And the reason he doesn't want them to tell anyone is we see what happens next, is that Jesus is going to tell them some incredibly hard things to understand. And especially hard to understand if they don't understand the cross and the resurrection yet. One day they'll get it. But for the moment, he says, don't tell anyone, because he tells them that he's going to be rejected. He's going to suffer by the hands of the church leaders. He's going to be killed, and he's going to rise on the third day. And then he says this. He says, if you want to follow me, you got to deny yourself, take up your cross, and follow me. Now, I know for us in this culture, when we think cross, we think, well, gold-plated, looks pretty, nice cross, right? We wear it around our neck. But if you're living in this time, you're with Jesus, and you say, take up your cross, you think, no way. Because the cross is where the worst criminals go. The cross is pain. The cross is suffering. The cross is humiliation. The cross is death, and it's bloody, and it's gory, and it's nasty. And now Jesus just told you that following him involves taking up one of those things in order to follow him. There's some things they don't understand. And yet there is Jesus going on a little bit of a hike with his inner circle. Peter, James, and John, back in Luke 9, verse 28. That's the setup of what we're at. He took Peter, James, and John, and they went up on a mountain to pray. Now that's not surprising, because Jesus is always going off praying, always going off talking to the Father, bringing others along. And as he was praying, the appearance of his face was altered. Now, this is something new. And his clothing became dazzling white, really new. And behold, two men were talking with him, Moses and Elijah. These guys were dead, and they're talking with Jesus. And I can almost imagine Peter, as he's kind of waking up and seeing this scene unfold, he's probably putting shit on James and John and saying, guys, are you seeing what I'm seeing? Or was it that fish we had at lunch? Because that fish was a little bit old, and I'm just like seeing stuff. Is that Moses? And that's Elijah? I mean, we heard about Moses and Elijah all of our lives. Moses, the leader of the people of Israel, through the journey of the Exodus, he led them out of captivity in Egypt. He brought them to the promised land. Moses, who would meet God face to face. And Elijah, a mighty prophet of God who would proclaim his word. And now here they are with Jesus. With Jesus, who we've seen do miraculous things. We've seen Jesus take some kid's lunch of 5 loaves of bread and 2 fish, and he fed over 5,000 men, plus women and children. We just saw Jesus a couple days ago talk and proclaim forgiveness. Who gives forgiveness but God himself? And we've heard Jesus go to this widow whose son was dead, and they had him on the burial shroud, and they were carrying him outside the city to finish the burial. And Jesus goes up and touches him, makes himself unclean. But I guess he wasn't unclean because the kid came back to life. This is Jesus. And this is Moses. And this is Elijah. And they're all here. And if you're Peter, you're James, and John, as you wake up to the situation going around you, you're excited. Where else in the world would you rather be? And in verse 33, we hear, as the men were departing from him, Peter said to Jesus, Master, it's good that we are here. Let's make 3 tents. One for you, one for Moses, and one for Elijah. Not knowing what he said. not knowing what he said, but we can understand why he said it, right? I mean, these are the guys that everybody wanted to be around. Moses and Elijah, and they're back from the dead, and they're with Jesus, your BFF, who's done incredible things. You want to build some tents. You want to stay on the mountain. Where else in the world would you want to be in the moment but in this mountain scene where Jesus and his glory is being revealed? Two of the most renowned people of history are there, and you, Peter, and James, and John, are privileged to be there. And so Peter's response is, I got to do something in the presence of Jesus. I got to do something. I got to build some tents. I got to stay here on the mountain. You've been there, I've been there too, right? We've had those moments in our lives where they are those mountaintop experiences. Might not be literal ones like they're experiencing here on Transfiguration, but those times in our lives when we just say, if I could hit pause, if I could just freeze life in this moment, if I could just replay this day over and over again, I want to stay on the mountain. I don't want to go back down to the valley. I know what's in the valley. I want to stay here in the presence of Jesus in his glory. But Peter's request to build the tabernacles, to build the tents, is denied. Not by Jesus, but by another person who's been present there on the mountain all along. They just didn't realize it. Verse 34. As he was saying these things, a cloud came and overshadowed them, and they were afraid as they entered the cloud. I don't know about you, but I've never thought of clouds as being very scary. I mean, the idea, kind of thinking of these past few mornings with this beautiful weather we've been having, there's been a lot of fog in the morning, and we don't usually think of those things being scary, clouds as being fearful things. But if you read your Old Testament, you learn that clouds are scary things because clouds signify the presence of the Lord God. A cloud would appear on the mountain of Sinai when Moses was upon it, and thunderbolts and lightning as he received the law of God. A cloud would appear in their mobile sanctuary that they would set up during the journey called the tabernacle, and in the presence of God signified by that cloud. A cloud, too, coming into the temple, signifying the presence of God there in the temple. Clouds signify the presence of God, so they're afraid. And even more so when the cloud starts speaking and says this to them, "This is my son, my chosen one. Listen to him." Three bold statements spoken by the Father. That this is my son, my chosen one. This is he of whom I proclaimed would come. And he is my chosen one, not to rule and to reign. He is my chosen one who will give his life as a ransom for many. He has been chosen, just as he told you a few days ago, to sacrifice his life for you. Therefore, I want you to listen to him. To listen to him. And I love their response in verse 36. And when the voice had spoken, Jesus was found alone, and they kept silent, and told no one in those days of anything of what they had seen. I love their response because they get it. The Father says, listen, and they listen. They don't understand it all. They probably have more confusion, more questions about Jesus than they do answers. But they know enough from the Father to be and remain in the presence of Jesus, even if it doesn't happen and unfold the way they think it should. I love their response to what Jesus had said, or to what the Father had said. And eventually they will tell people about what happens, but it's not until after his death and resurrection when the pieces start falling into place, and they tell people like Luke, who was then able to record this event for us. But I think as we see these disciples' response, I think there's a lot we can learn from being in the presence of Jesus and what the Father has invited them to do. And I think the first thing that we can kind of recognize as we look at this is that when it comes to listening, the first thing we've got to do is we've got to be present. We got to be present in order to listen. Well, we got to be present. I know that's like, whoa, that's profound, right? But it is. Now, let me illustrate it for you this way. How many of you have ever entered like one of those contests at like a restaurant or at a small business where you kind of fill out a little piece of form or a little ticket or something, and they give you one ticket, they keep the other ticket, they put it in like one of those big drums, right? You've had that experience, right? And a lot of those, one of the things they'll say on the little ticket in the little fine print where all of the legalese is the idea that you got to be present to win. That if you're not there when the drawing takes place, you can't win. Even if they call your name, you don't win if you're not there to claim your prize, no matter what that prize is. And I've been to some of those drawings where they have those things going around, and the owner of the company reaches in and they pull out the name and they say, John Smith. And everybody's quiet for about 10 seconds. And then you hear the whoosh, John Smith isn't there. And everybody's feeling kind of bad for John Smith because he just won the prize. He just doesn't know it. No, they're not really feeling bad because you're actually there and you're present. You're thinking, good, John Smith isn't there. But Nathan's here. Go ahead and draw out another name. Let's keep this going and let's see if we win because we know the rules. You got to be present to win. Now, that's how it works at giveaways at restaurants and small businesses. How much more so is that true with your spouse, with your kids, with your grandkids, with your family, with your friends, and yes, your faith. To listen well, we need to be present. That is, if we really want to win. And it's not just about being present. It's about what happens when we are present. Because as we said in the beginning of the sermon, there's a lot of voices vying for our attention. Think about that list of voices that you put earlier on the sheet, and think about all the opportunities we have during this season that we're getting into that we call Lent. And I know Lent is a time of year where traditionally people have kind of given up something for Lent so that they can remember that Jesus gave up their life for them. And I know the things that people give up a lot of times are sweets like chocolate, or maybe they give up their favorite drink like a caffeine drink or coffee or alcohol, or they give up their hobby for Lent for those 40 days. And that's all good and everything like that. Probably some of those things you just needed to give up anyways, and you probably should have a different plan for giving those things up maybe permanently. But a lot of the things we give up really don't fill us up as much as they could. You see, I would challenge us maybe that this Lent is what we need to give up is some of those voices in our lives. That what we need to do is that if we want to hear the voice of Jesus, we've got to turn down and turn off some of those other voices that only want something from us. Now let me be clear here. That doesn't mean you could turn off the voice of your wife. I will say it again, guys, you cannot turn off the voice of your wife. It's on the record, it's on the video. You don't even, don't even go there, okay? I'm not talking about the people you do life with. I'm talking about those people and those things around you that only want something from you. Maybe this season of Lent is the season where you need to turn down some of those other voices that they are pouring into your life and in fact are changing you and you don't even realize it. The people around you realize it because you're not the person you used to be, because those voices have overtaken your thoughts and in your minds. And maybe it's a voice that's come to you because of something that you're addicted to when it comes to social media. Maybe it's because you find yourself engrossed with the next news article after the news article after news article, and all of a sudden you find yourself listening more to the voices of the world around you that want something from you, and not the one who created the world, who only wants something for you. It's hard. Because the voices are loud. And we don't even realize that the voices are changing us. The voices do. They understand it. They get it. That's why they shout louder and louder, vying for our attention. And when it comes to the voice of Jesus, what happens is that he just becomes another voice in the cacophony of voices that are bombarding us every day. And he becomes simply an advisor and not the Lord of our life. He doesn't become the King of Kings of our life. He just simply becomes another voice that we can choose to listen to or not. I think the disciples understood that. There's a lot of voices that they had to turn off and turn down in their day. Voices of religious leaders who didn't understand Jesus. Voices of some of the people even in their own families, and even in Jesus' own family. Confused, uncertain. But for those who remained, for those who followed Jesus, they recognized they were in the presence of the right voice, who wanted everything for them. Perhaps they understood the beauty of the psalmist who declares in Psalm 46 this opportunity, this invitation to be still and know that I am God. That's his invitation. You're not God. The person next to you isn't God either. There's only one God. Sometimes his voice can get lost in all the shouting voices that vie for our attention every day. So this Lent, I want to challenge you. I want to help you listen to the voice. You've seen it around, and we've been talking about it for a number of weeks now. One of the challenges that we're putting before you for these next 40 days, starting on Ash Wednesday, is the Red Letter Challenge. Now, the Red Letter Challenge, got my shirt on right here to help you remind yourself, is about living the red life. The red life being those red letters that are in your Bibles, in the red letter editions. I know a lot of us have black and white editions, but the red letter editions, those highlight and emphasize the words of Jesus. And what would happen if you, during this season of Lent, instead of just getting rid of stuff, we actually filled our lives with the voice of Jesus, to hear what he has to say to us, to hear what he has to proclaim to us. When we hear the voice of Jesus, we might just find ourselves being changed by what he has to say. And to help you in this hearing the voice of Jesus, one of the challenges we're going to give to you is this Red Letter Challenge book. Now I got to tell you, these have been flying off. We only have a few of these left, and if you haven't gotten one yet, we still have a few that are remaining. They're $20, but we're going to give them to you for $10. In fact, I don't care if you don't have any money and you don't want to have, it's going to break your budget, whatever. Just take one. I want to charge you something because if I don't charge you something, free stuff kind of gets left on the side and you don't realize it's important, but I believe this is going to change your life. I believe that if you spend time with the words of Jesus, that's life transforming. That it can transform the way you think. And so there's some of these left at the back, so each of our exits here this morning. Pick one up before you leave today. And on day one, which is going to be Ash Wednesday, we'll remind you that when we gather and worship at 9, noon, and 7 on that day, that this is the day to start. We'll start reading. And for the next 40 days, up until Palm Sunday, every day in the red letters of Jesus. If you're in a small group, I encourage you during this season to be a part of the Red Letter Challenge and go over that with your small group. If you want to be in a small group, we'd love to get you connected with one. There's still opportunities to sign up one. We can plug you into that. Because I believe life change happens better when we're doing life together with one another. We need that accountability. That's what we've been created for. And I know that I can't get to each and every one of your homes this week and encourage you and walk with you and walk through you these 40 days with the red letter. That'd be awesome if we could. But it wouldn't be awesome for my family. But it would be awesome if you guys could do it together. Maybe it's going to be together with a spouse. Maybe your small group is going to be your family. I mean, I got 6 people in my family now. We got our own small group. We'll add a few more into that as well. But get together and do life with other people. And as you do life with other people, I know for some of you, you're saying to yourself, Pastor, don't you know spring break is next week? Yeah, I do know spring break is next week. Guess what? It's mobile. You can take it with you. Okay? You can take it with you wherever you go on spring break. I know some of you are saying, Pastor, that's awesome, but I'm going back to Minnesota next week. Now, first of all, we need to talk about your looking at the weather forecast in Minnesota next week. Winter Texans, you got to stay around for a couple more weeks. But if you're on the road, guess what? We're not the only ones doing it this Lent. There's 51 churches throughout the United States who are part of the Red Letter Challenge in this Lenten season. If you're going to Woodbury, Minnesota, you can go see my friend Tom at Woodbury, Minnesota, Woodbury Lutheran. If you're going to San Antonio, you can go see our friends at Shepherd of the Hills in San Antonio. I got a whole list of churches that are going to be a part of this challenge. We might not all be on the same days, but this is something that we see as beneficial. Our buddy Zach, who put this together, a pastor, has spent some time using it with his church in Florida, and it's been a blessing to them. And it's hopefully going to be a blessing to you as you spend time in the red letters of Jesus, because they're transformational words that he gives to us. I know for some of you right now, you're thinking, well, I don't have time for that. I don't have time. How am I going to fit it into my schedule? I got a lot of things I got to do. I got a lot of things that, responsibilities. I've got a lot of things that are going on at work. I got a whole season of a new show on Netflix I haven't binge watched yet. And we got all these things that we have on our list. I got my list. But what I'm going to challenge you to think about as we think about this challenge is to say to ourselves, are we going to fit Jesus into our schedules? I mean, if we're going to fit him in, then please don't do this. I mean, please don't do it. If he's just going to be like a fitting into your schedule, because then he's just another one of voices in your life, and it's not going to be helpful. But if we can approach this as an opportunity to say to Jesus, no, you're the Lord of my life. You're my King and my Redeemer. You're my God, and I want to hear what you have to say. It's transforming. Now, I know there's things going on in your schedule, and you'll miss some days of this and everything like that. Don't let the excuses drive you away from the one who wants everything for you. He wants nothing from you. Well, he does want some things from you. Your sin, your guilt, your brokenness, your shame, your regrets. He'd like those from you. But the only way you'll hear that and see that is if you're with him. Now, on our website, we got all the resources available for you in this series too, to stpaultexas.com, red letter. If you're going to still be on social media during this season, we'll be there too, and there'll be some other things that we'll be sharing with you through that, because we want you to be in the words of Jesus. Don't just let them go on the side. Hear from him, because it changes. It changes us. And we know this to be true. We got evidence of it. In fact, we can go back 2,000 years to one person whose life was transformed by being in the presence of Jesus and listening to Jesus' words, instead of the voices that were around him, that were saying something different. And when he heard from the voice of Jesus, he leaned into what Jesus had to say, because if anybody can predict and pull off their own death and resurrection, you better believe they're worth listening to. And when Jesus appeared to a guy by the name of Saul on a road one day, it transformed Saul so much that he changed his name to Paul, and he became one of the greatest church planners in the history of the world. And Paul wrote about that transformation in the book of Philippians, and he writes it this way. He says, yes, everything else is worthless. It's worthless when compared with the priceless gain of knowing Christ Jesus my Lord. I have discarded everything else, counting it all as garbage, so that I may have Christ and become one with him. I no longer count on my own goodness, my ability to obey God's law, but I trust Christ to save me. For God's way of making us right with himself depends on faith. Then he says this: as a result, I can really know Christ and experience the mighty power that raised him from the dead. I can learn what it means to suffer with him, sharing in his death, so that somehow, I can experience the resurrection from the dead. Eternity is what hangs in the balance. And there's only one who can offer you an answer to your death with a resurrection. And his words are written and read throughout the pages of the New Testament from the eyewitnesses of those who walked with him and talked with him, who ate with him, who watched him suffer, die, and rise from the dead. Don't worry, they weren't expecting it. They weren't ready for it. But when they experienced it, it changed everything for them. I think it can do that again. For me, for my family, for all of you too. So would you join me this season? 40 days. And if after the 40 days you think it wasn't worth your time, I'll give you your money back. You can have your $10. I don't need it. I'll give you $100 back if you don't think it's worth your time. I'll try. Where can you get an offer like that? Right? I just made it up here on the fly. Would you be in Jesus' words? Would you hear from him? The Father gives you a beautiful invitation. He says, "This is my Son, my chosen one. Listen to him." Pick a book up on the way out today. If we run out of them, there's a sheet you can sign your name on. We'll have more here by hopefully Wednesday or Thursday if we need some more. But be in that Word. Join us next week as we kind of unpack where we're going with this. As Jesus lays out his 5 purposes and 5 ways of what it looks like to live a life following him, reading his words, written and read. Let me pray for us. Father, we thank you. We thank you that you love us so much that you didn't sit idly by on the sideline, but you came in real flesh and blood as a Son, the chosen one, to give his life as a ransom for many, so that we may have life in his name. Lord, I pray that in this season of Lent, as we begin to journey once again with Jesus to his cross and resurrection, that we wouldn't just journey on the sideline, but we jump in with him. That we read his word, and we let that word and his voice be the one that speaks loudly to us. A voice that wants everything for us, who knows us better than we know ourselves, who has called us by name in the waters of our baptism, who feeds us with his very body and blood at his table, who promises that he, right now, is preparing a place for us. Lord, get us into that word, so that in the midst of the confusing things of this world, we may find the assurance of who you are for us. We love you, Jesus. And thank you for loving us. Amen. Please stand. Receive the blessing of the Lord. The Lord bless you and keep you. The Lord